Yeah.
At what point in life did you realise you had the ability to be a songwriter?
Very, very late. I was inspired originally by people like Percy Shelley and John Keats when I was about 10 or 11 years old. Mm-hmm. I was inspired by a lot of other things as well, and I used to make a lot of trouble. I was inspired by by kind of guys around me who were basically just lunatics. But the other side of the coin was English literature, which was very strange. I don't know why that kind of inspired me, but I wanted to be a poet, and that went on for a few years. And then I kind of dropped out of school and then dropped out of the Air Force. Dropped out of school to go away, run away from home, and dropped out of the Air Force because that just wasn't me either. I had ambitions to fly, but when I failed every available medical, there was no way the Air Force was going to keep me. So I was writing poems basically, and what I was doing was, and I picked up a guitar when I was 14 and 13 or 14, doesn't matter, and was inspired by the skiffle stuff, which led me straight to the blues. And it was, in my own case, it was the Southern Country Black Blues, which is kind of people like Leadbelly, Josh White, Brownie McGee, Sonny Terry. There's people I'm forgetting. Big Bill Brunsey. Mm-hmm. Big Bill Brunsey was kind of a big favourite of mine, and I got to busking in the street. And I travelled all over Europe with it and North Africa, and I did, it was a fair living, depended on where you went. Stockholm and Copenhagen were really good, and Paris wasn't so good, and Rome was pretty poor, but it was good. But the further south you got, the hotter it got, the poorer it got. And so you went up to the north and earned quite a lot of money, and then came back down south again. And I went into Spain one time, I hitched to Spain just to buy a guitar from Scandinavia, and went back to Scandinavia with other things other than the guitar as well, to sell on the street. So it was a varied life, and I didn't really put the two together until I was playing on the streets and in the daytime, and then going home at night and writing poems. And I didn't start writing songs. I didn't put the two together and think I can do this until probably I was 21, 22, something like that.
So would that be the point when music started to become a career option then?
Yes, I knew when I kind of landed on I'd done a few kind of folk club, ethnic type music places on the continent. Just played, I remember the first place I ever played in was the folk club in Copenhagen in Denmark, and I came back. They were quite, because I was playing blues in those places. I can remember I played St James Infirmary on that very first gig. That was one of the ones, and I think Trouble in Mind as well, but which was very typical of my state at the time. But then when I came to England, and I suddenly came back to England, I suddenly discovered that there were all these places happening in London, and the guys weren't just singing songs that were, 20, 30, 40 years old. They were singing their own things and more contemporary things, and the guys from the Celtic fringe, the Scots, and particularly the Irish boys, had a tradition which was basically untouched by modern music, and were playing straight from, stuff that was basically centuries old, and wonderful to hear. And of course, as I was thrown into that mixing pot, and people writing their own songs, and it suddenly occurred to me that I'd be good at it. I would be good at this, because what I'd actually been doing was rehearsing the writing since I'd been 13, 14, with poems. And so I just threw myself into it, and I guess the first influence on that scene would have been Alex Campbell or Bert Jans. And there were a lot of people, an awful lot of people. I can remember Long John Baldry taking half my guitar away with his cufflinks as he borrowed it one night. And Alex Harvey wanted to form a band with me, and there was all kinds of things happened in those first couple of years I was down there, and it mushroomed from there. And I just, the skill that I'd got, that I'd honed over the previous several years, was very useful when it came to writing songs. It was a completely different thing altogether, because what speaks and what sings are usually two different things. But it was only a smaller adjustment, really.
Was it a rather competitive folk scene in London in the mid-'60s when you were there?
Very, very competitive indeed. It was it had been... it was a place where the Americans came to, particularly people like Paul Simon, Bob Dylan and Paul Simon came to pick up songs to take them back to America and Americanize them. And I remember. I'm drifting a bit now, and I'll have to come back. But I can remember that Dylan. We were outraged. I can remember Brendan Behan's brother Dominic being absolutely outraged because Dylan had stolen one of his songs, which was called "The Patriot Game," and it was a song about the Irish situation, and which was, in the 60s was not a particularly violent situation at all. It was only in the beginning of the 70s, of course, that it got violent. And but right there in the 60s, the embryonic, what it was, I suppose, the later IRA in its embryonic violent form was prone to singing songs that were, Republican, obviously Republican songs, and one of there were a lot of new songs being written all the time. One of them was by Dominic Behan, was called "The Patriot Game," and Dylan had nicked it and turned it into "With God on Our Side." And it was most of the words and all of the music. And Dominic was outraged, and we kind of, the two or three of us, we thought that it was, it wasn't on for these guys to come over and do that, because these were songs that, I could see the point. Some of these songs had been around for ages and ages and were really good songs and didn't need to be stolen. I can also see it from Dylan's point of view. I can see that that, someone like that, who is basically a journalist, wants to modernize something, and but at the same time, he doesn't have to put his own name underneath it like he's written it. The one that outraged me was, or the one that got to me, I wasn't outraged. I was never outraged. I sort of, I guess basically just smiled. But the one that got me was a song called Lord Franklin, which was a really beautiful 19th century song about the expedition by Lord Franklin to sail the Northwest Passage over the top of Canada, and the voyage of the two ships had got locked in ice and perished right in the north of way north. And they've just discovered the bodies and things this last decade or two. And that was a really beautiful song that his wife had commissioned in 1846, and it was called Lord Franklin. And Dylan turned it into Bob Dylan's Dream, with a lot of the words as well. And it was like, what's this guy doing? And then there was Masters of War, which was Nottingham Town, note for note. And it was a bit weird listening to all this stuff and knowing that it was nicked and changed. But I drift. Paul Simon did it with Scarborough Fair, and Martin Carthy had a go at him about that, and won as well, which is probably not a very well-known fact. But anyway, it was a hotbed, and there was serious amounts of contenders. I think the whole of youth that could pick up a guitar came and tried, because it wasn't as though you wanted to be a pop star. Nobody was doing that. You just were there. It was a scene. It was vibrant. It was full of life, and you just wanted to be part of it. And if you were any good, you stuck, and people came and saw you, and you thought, well, okay, what can I give them from my past that's going to be relevant to, their lives now? And it just carried on from there. And you just became a vehicle. You became their own social vehicle. It's looking back, it's an amazing thing to have happened, because it was a melting pot. It's not like sort of becoming a I don't know, every scene has its own beginning, but I would imagine that the 90s pop music would have been a very, very different scene than that, and probably in Britain would have emanated from various city bases, like sort of Manchester and Sheffield, and not particularly London. Well, London as well, but all kinds of places and that was true of that. Now that I think about it, that was true of the early 60s as well, because there was all the Liverpool sound and against the Manchester sound, and those guys must have had their places like in Liverpool, like the Cavern and all that stuff, where they graduated from and gravitated to. And all of those are kind of interesting little melting pots, but this one happened in the middle of, what was one of the biggest and fast-moving cities in not only Europe but the world at the time, and everybody came and dumped on it, and you got people from all over the place. I remember an American guitarist called Danny Calvin. I've never heard of him since, but he must be out there somewhere, who was a fantastic guitarist. He could, he was easily the equal of Davy Graham. But it was a fantastic scene to be involved in, because you just didn't know what was going to happen, and anybody could turn up and did. And it was all an inspiration, and I just couldn't have torn myself away from it at all.
Do you remember much about the recording of your first album and how you adapted to performing your songs in the confines of a studio after being a live performer for a while?
Well, the first record was made in a couple of days. I mean, I had the songs. I was singing them. I was singing them live. Well, most of them. Some of them I wasn't able to because they were figments of something different that I wanted to do, and I always had a broad, scope. And I always saw some things with bands, some things with orchestra, some things with... In life, it didn't actually pan out like that because, I mean, if one or two accidents in the 60s and 70s, I would have kind of been able to probably be still using an orchestra now. But that didn't pan out, and part of that's my own fault in any case, because I was too willful and too individual, really. And so, sorry, what was it? The original record, yes. The original record has a big scope. It lands in a lot of places as the solo guitar things, and then the band things, and there's the beginnings of wanting to use strings as well. But it was done in 2 days, and there was a band that came in, which was I got John Renbourn in to do a couple of tracks, and there was a band came in with Richie Blackmore before a long time before the Deep Purple days, and we did the whole thing inside a week. We did the whole thing, and it was in a tiny sort of outhouse of someone's, Pierre Tubbs's outhouse, which I mean, it's probably the usual situation. It probably doesn't differ from anybody's first beginnings. It was very good, I thought. We got a lot of... It was made in a week. We got a lot done in a week, and, you did in those times, because there was it was 2 tracks. You were working on 2-track machines. And, I think the first 2 records... I think the second record was made on a 4-track. So, I didn't like the second record because I thought that I was too governed by what had become what was expected of me by the producer, and I wasn't ever going to go that in the way that he wanted me to go. But nevertheless, the second record was made in 2 weeks. From start to finish. And the third record was more, the third record would have been either that or even less. So until I reached the 4th or 5th record, I wasn't spending any time in the studio at all.
Something that's been really pleasing is seeing your back catalogue get a reissue on CD. Are you happy with how some of those old albums have come up on the new technology?
Yeah, well, I think that they still stand up. I think the second one is a bit of a skeleton in the cupboard because of the production on it. But I still think that it's... I mean, I say that to some people, and they say, "Oh, that was my favourite record when I was 17. What are you talking about?" Blah, 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 blah. And so, I generally just shut up about those things. But yeah, the new technology is you see, I'm very different. I know basic technology. In order to work the way I do, I have to be aware of how things work. And so I make myself as aware as I need to be of the technology that's around me. And I think that the technology that existed always, even right back then, back then it was good. It got really good round about 1970. It got really good. Tape got really good, and it's now gone into a completely different medium altogether. But if I think about where I've come from and where I'm going to, the technology is just a vehicle. It's just plainly a vehicle. It's nothing else. And so long as I can actually get my thing down and done and recorded, then it's not really going to whether I can do it at 96k sampling rate or 44.1 sampling rate isn't really crucial. That's not a factor for me. It's not a factor that everybody says that, tape compression and, recording on analog is warmer and, yes, I can hear that kind of thing, but if you've written a kind of warm song, then you owe it to yourself to record the warmth in it, whatever medium you're recording it on. And I think that although people say, that digital is harder this and harsh that and misses out, you don't hear all the frequencies, etc., etc. I think that if you're in a studio and you're there with the machines and you're sitting listening to something you just sung, and if it doesn't sound like you singing a song, then you've got to start from scratch again. But if it sounds like the song that you've just been singing, then probably you ought to put it on a record and put it into the marketplace, and forget about the technical boys will tell you, and sometimes, and a lot of the time, you've got to take their lead because they have things that are sharper than ears to listen with, and so you do tend to go with what technology is going, but technology is just a tool. It's not anything that I've ever thought, well, I'd rather do this or I'd rather do that. I go for convenience and forgetting the words and the music down and out. That's it.
Now, you've long been an artist that I guess has been difficult for critics and reviewers to categorise as they like to do. Do you like to keep them guessing, or do you take much notice of what they have to say about your music?
Well, the lifeblood of Publicity, which I enjoyed during my youth, has long since disappeared. The world is now run by Robbie Williams and Oasis. And, by the Spice Girls in their various forms. And someone my age at my stage doesn't get a look in at on the Publicity end at all. You scrape. I scrape for any publicity that I get. It doesn't come. You're part of the past, and people can refer to you and blah blah blah. It's nearly always erroneously, but you're not part of the present. You're only part of the present in your own circle and among those who are still cognizant. But as far as the world and what people say goes, there aren't very many of those left anymore. There's the odd outpost. There's the odd place that will keep things alive that most of the pop culture will consider should be dead by now. When a lot of people, for instance, upon hearing my name, will say, "Is he still alive?" Not many people in the sort of upper echelons of the British pop culture would know that I'm still active. It's the truth of those matters over in this side of the world is pretty cut off. It's pretty desolate for. I mean, I don't want to paint an absolutely ridiculously, absurdly desolate picture for you, but it's like anything that's 50 odd years old. You're either right at the top of your profession and being overpaid, and because that's been happening to you for a couple of decades, and you've got on the gravy train, and that's it, or you're slowly sinking into oblivion, into a figment of the past. I'm afraid, I mean, I like to put a better view on it than that as a rule, but that's the bare bones of the truth. Now, to actually become more positive, to give you a more positive view of what happens, of what is happening at the moment. As always, and as it always was, the world pop culture is controlled by those probably three, not 400, 300 and something major, in inverted commas, artists and their management. It's still controlled by those guys. You can break into that, but it's an impossible task because you are a slave to it. And one of the things that has marked me out, and a lot of other people too, is that I won't go in the I'm not a wind-up toy. I won't go in the direction that you want me to go into. I mean, I've been dropped by a lot of management because of that, because they want to mold you into something that they know works, or their idea of what works. And what I write and what I do isn't necessarily what anybody can make work on that kind of a level. If a manager with the sort of vision that I have, and I don't mean that my vision is any better than anybody else's, but the kind of visions, the vision I have, turned up and had said at some stage, I know how we can do this. I know how commercially we can make this work, and done it, and gone out and done it almost independently of me, then I would be in a different place today. But I'm in the place that I am, and it's not a sad place at all. It's a very nice place. It's a great place. I've managed to preserve most of what I am and most of what I've meant. The vision to not to harp on a word for too long, but the vision that I do have is consistent. It's been consistent over the years, and it probably will be consistent. It's probably boringly consistent, but anyway, publicity is very difficult to come by. But the positive side is that now the communications media are such that you can. It's possible to have a second and third life, because people who had at one time, because of their life and circumstances, completely left your situation, and you'd become like rowing boats on an ocean, disconnected, totally disconnected, can pick up on you again through the internet and say, oh, I remember. Do you remember him? He was, I've done it myself. I've done it myself with various things. Oh, I wonder what happened to. And you just type a name in, and bang, it comes up.
Absolutely.
And it's brilliant. it's a medium that is not yet in the control of the center of I want to say the CIA, but it's them it came from. I mean, it was a communications tool for those guys to communicate with each other, but it suddenly, I mean, I've forgotten who it was now that saw it as I can't remember his name now, and I see his face I see his face. He and it was a group of other guys turned it into the internet, and the internet is an incredibly free place, which is not going to be shackled down for quite some time yet, and that's in some ways a horror story, and in other ways brilliant, absolutely fantastic, because it's an out of control revolution that's being handled by everybody who partakes in it, and no longer can anything really be hidden from any nation by any other, or from any person by any other. It was originally a secret medium that is now exposed. That now exposes the whole of humanity. I can see a time when that'll reverse again, and there will be hugely secret places within it. But it's a revolution at the moment that I'm enjoying, because it's given me a new lease, and there are a lot of people who I'm sure feel the same way as me. And then, of course, what that does for you, it gives you the ability to contact people and tell them that this is happening, or this is happening now, or we're doing this, and so you can contact people in a way that you couldn't have dreamt of doing 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Well, that's how I found you.
Sorry? That's right.
Yeah. I read an old interview with you where you claimed that the Led Zeppelin song, Hats Off to Harper, became something of a burden to you over the years. In what way did it? And did you find Zeppelin fans coming to see you to perform just on the strength of that song?
Well, yes, but my association with Jimmy and Robert has been a very friendly one over the years, and so I guess that over on this side of the planet, I'm kind of, well, Robert used to refer to me as the fifth member of the band, and so that in some way that's current. That's been current over here for however long it is now. 25 years or something. So everybody knows that now and again Page will turn up on a gig, and or Robert will turn up and heckle me from the crowd or whatever. So you get a crossover. It's a natural thing to have a crossover. I think in Australia, I think Australia is probably, or was, in some ways still is, a very remote place, because although when I came over in '86, and I could see at that stage when I came that there was a great deal of Americanization going on. I mean, it was, to all intents and purposes, it's like everywhere else. The American dream has landed in some sort of a way. The gas stations, and everything looks the same. That sort of that infrastructure that the modern world has is basically an American formula. And well, it's now developed. It's now crossed there's fertilization from the rest now, but originally it would have been a lot of it is kind of, nevertheless. Australia is not America, but you could see that was a contact. That was a definite contact that was there, and it's from movies, it's from media, it's from awareness of what people are doing elsewhere on the planet. But then there's parts of Australia I found or felt that were completely different from anywhere else, and in some ways a backwater, but with a strange avant-garde of its own. And so I just I think that Zeppelin and me are going to be a different item in that kind of a place than happens here. I think that here it's very old hat, and everybody in the media, in the rock media, kind of knows that and associates mine. I don't think it really matters much. I don't think it counts for much at all. And as for the song itself, in some ways, it's kind of, they got it down as being written by Charles Obscure, and there are all kinds of innuendos there. There are two in the two names, and it all kind of, it's almost a joke. You would be hard pressed not to think of it as jokey in one or two ways. At the same time, it was an accolade. It was a tribute that I didn't expect anything like, and a huge lift in many ways by being recognized by your own peers, by those among your own peers who you thought were doing pretty good stuff. And so that was great. It was wonderful. It was wonderful at the time because it was recognition. And recognition from your own is great. But then as the years wear on, people should know different. I think that people should know different things about me than the two most obvious facts. There are three, but they don't. And those things always get bandied around in the publicity. Always, it's number one, number two, number three. The number one is I think probably the number one is the Zeppelin song. Number two is the Pink Floyd song.
Yep.
And number three would be the sheep thing. Which doesn't die. And the only three things that people would ever know about me are those three things. And they're nothing like in the core, nothing like to do with the core of what I am. And so it's in that sense it's a burden, because everybody can write you off with these three simple things, and not take a proper look. It's like you reside in this pigeonhole where nobody gets a chance to know anything different about you. But anyway, I'm talking too much, John.
Well, you can rest assured I wasn't going to bring up the sheep thing at all.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
How about writing songs much differently today than you did back in the earlier days?
I think that I never write one song the same as another. It's always a different way. I'm always I'm always engaged in a plot to get a song together, somehow or another, by hook or by crook. And, spring up on it, surprise it. I'm turning a song into. I'm animating the song now, but I always feel that every song is completely different, and that's probably got something to do with the inspiration. I probably start out fiddling around playing sometimes, and then a song will come. Or I start out with an idea, with something that I definitely want to do, but then it'll mutate into something else. And there's very rarely anything gets written that hasn't changed in some way because of that inner core that I was talking about a while back, because of that, the inner vision. It's something that is very difficult for me to get behind, beyond, above, below. It stands there in the middle of me and says, no, you can't have that word. Why can't I have that word? Because if you use that word, then it means this. And, okay, well, can I use a comma then? No, you can't use a comma. Because a comma alters the entire sense of the whole sentence. Oh, okay. So there's this barter goes on all the time between me and myself as to what gets written and what doesn't get written, and what passes quality control and what doesn't. Which is, songwriting is a kind of it's an escapade. It's nothing that you could that I can describe. I sit down and I play the guitar, and I've got more into playing the guitar recently. Mm-hmm. I've got fed up with not playing the guitar. That's probably more like it. So I'm devoting large stretches of time now to just sitting down and playing the guitar, which is I find making me write slightly different things, different songs, and I feel that just at the moment there's more care. I'm taking more care with the musical side. It would be impossible for me to take more care with the lyrical side, although there are the occasional things that slip through. There are one or two things that slip through that I'm not very enamored with at some later date. But I try to make sure now that, particularly now, I try to make sure that nothing nothing that I'm going to think about that like that in that sense at a later date slips through. So it's very, it's a controlled thing in some ways, but totally out of control in others. It's inexplicable. I couldn't describe my songwriting to you.
What about?
I mean, I could describe how I wrote a particular song, but then not. It would be interesting. What would be interesting, I suppose, would be to set up a workshop sometime with a few people and have an idea and start and work on an idea. And that would be the only way that anybody who is an outsider would see something of how work was done. And it is work. And it is serious work. I think that some songs like Another Day and Old Cricketer came in 10 minutes. The whole thing came in 10 minutes. That was it. And I thought, that's a good note. I I must write that down and remember it tomorrow. Blah, blah, blah. Got on with my day. Came back to it, and I thought, that's really good. And I played it again the following day. I thought, this is a song. I don't need to write anything else. This is it. And so it must have been gestating there for a while.
Yeah.
And it suddenly appeared on a page, and it was there in 10 minutes. Same with Another Day. But then you get other songs that you think, oh, this is great. This is going to be a really good thing. And then suddenly you hit the rocks, and you can't see how, there's too much fog. You're on the rocks and it's foggy, and you can't see how to do it, and then it gets put away, and it can be started after the next phone bill arrives, whatever. It can go for 6 months without any work on it at all, and then suddenly you'll see it on a piece of paper somewhere and think, oh yeah, that was that. Oh, I know what I can do with that. And it's sort of, you need the fresh head on it. All of the songs are completely different in that way, and some of them are worked and worked and worked on and reworked, and it's like sort of painting. You know that you could carry on forever on this one, and still manage to carry on writing the same song for a whole lifetime. And maybe that's what we do. Maybe I've got sort of 10 songs that keep being rewritten. But it's a strange process. I think the more I get into it, the longer I live as a songwriter, the less, in some ways, I know about it. I mean, I can waffle, but it's not a. That's a confusion in terms, isn't it? It's not a fine art.
Reading your website, it seems that you spend a lot of time travelling. Does the travelling influence your writing or your music in any way?
Yes, I do love to travel. I think that I'd love to travel. To be honest with you, I'd love to travel away from the planet. Quite a lot of the time. But I think that when you go to different places, a taste of something can be is a poem in itself. I often go to places where there's a desert and go out into the desert, whatever it is. It can be a desert of snow, and just think, thoughts like, I wouldn't last 2 minutes here. I can only get. I've only managed to get here by virtue of the fact that I can burn fossil fuel, and there is the vehicle of my rescue stood next to me, and I can wander for a couple of miles away from that vehicle in the middle of nowhere. But if I was there under any other circumstances, it would be life-threatening. And I like those experiences. I've always liked, in some way, life-threatening experiences that are reasonably safe. I almost fell off the roof yesterday, so you almost didn't get this interview, but maybe you would have been better off without it.
No, not at all. And just before we wind up, Roy, recording plans, anything on the horizon there?
Yes, there's lots. This record's being written at the moment, and there are, let me see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 10 songs now, and about 5 of them are recorded. So, in some way or another, they're not finished yet. I was hoping to be able to finish by September, to be able to have the record out by September. That's a hope. As I'll know in June, because if I can quickly write 3 or 4 songs, then I'll know that there's a record in. I'll be able to put a record out in September, and do the little tour, and then come back and maybe start on another. Because I'm very, very interested now in keeping my brain going, keeping the whole thing. There's so much to do now for me. There is so much to there is so much to write about. The world is moving so quickly, and it all deserves a comment in some way or another. I always feel like I do right now, that when I'm speaking to people, particularly when I'm doing an interview, I always feel as though I've said too much and I haven't said anything at all. And that's correct. I know I'm right with that. But the songs are completely something different than that. They encapsulate, they crystallize, they précis these long moments of thoughts that I have. They bring them down into, the songs bring these silly conversations I have down into manageable pieces. And I think that's part of my will. Part of my will is to do that, to bring the whole of this cloud of conversation that I bring to every conversation into a smaller thing. Even though some of them are 25-minute songs, they're smaller than, if you just put a tape recorder in front of me and just gave me one question, you would find at the end of 3 hours that I was still trying to answer that one question and still failing.
Okay, Roy. Look, I've got to thank you for your time. It's been fantastic to speak with you. Australia is very happy to know that you're still alive and well and turning out some great songs.
Yeah, well, thank you, John. I think I'll do my best for as long as I can, and I'm very, very grateful for. I'm very, very grateful for the acknowledgement from the other side of the planet. Believe me.
That's great. And 1986 was a long time ago, so you're more than due to pay us another visit down here.
Yes, well, I'd really like to. The problem there is that there's so much to do over here, and I know that there are people over there waiting for me, but I just can't. If I could only get to it, then I would. And probably I should leave you just by saying that as soon as I can get there, I will, because when I was over there in '86, I really did enjoy it. It was something that was very different, and I'd really like that experience again.
Oh, good. That would be wonderful. And in the meantime, we've got the new record to look forward to.
Yes.
Okay, Roy. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks very much, John.
All the best, and take it easy next time you're on the roof there. We don't want to lose you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, and take care.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Bye, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.